Hare Krishna. Welcome to the live studios here in the Darshan room of Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji's Dham here in Dallas, Texas. We're surrounded by exalted Vaishnavas, a couple of the traveling party, Sankirtan traveling party from Kansas City is with us. We welcome all of you who have tuned in or who are going to tune in at your convenience. We're reading Srimad-Bhagavatam on a daily basis, as I vowed, and we have arrived on the 11th canto, 2nd chapter, and we'll begin from the 32nd verse. But before we do, we're going to read or recite the glorification of Srimad-Bhagavatam by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the senior disciple of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram, and it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of light to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidvandoditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvadasa Vasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Mad Mahadana Mannishtadaka Madbhagya Madananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhutadhayin atini chochatakada hanamunchagada chinmam premnarit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, no excuses. Please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. You may remember that the Nava Yogendras, the 9 Yogendras, the sons of Rishabdev, an incarnation of Krishna, who turned out to be Paramahamsas, the great sages, just entered into the sacrificial arena of Maharaja Nimi, the king of Videha. And Maharaja Nimi has just asked a series of questions, 9 questions, very deep questions. And the Navayogendras are now going to answer those questions, each one of them answering one of those 9 questions. So that's where we pick up our reading for today. 11th canto. We're beginning with with text 32. Sri Narada said, O Vasudeva, because this is a conversation between, the Bhagavatam's like this. There's different conversations overlaid on different conversations as the absolute truth is brought down to us from the highest authorities down to the place where the Bhagavatam is describing. Sri Narada said, O Vasudeva, when Maharaja Nimi had thus inquired from the 9 Yogendras about devotional service to the Lord, those best of saintly persons sincerely thanked the king for his questions and spoke to him with affection in the presence of the members of the sacrificial assembly and the Brahmana priests. So this is, Narada Muni is explaining this, what's happening to Vasudeva, the father of Krishna. Purport. According to Sridhar Swami, not only the king, but also the members of the assembly and the priests conducting the sacrifice were all devoted to hearing and chanting the glories of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sages, beginning with Kavi, will now each speak in turn, answering the questions of the king. Text 33. Sri Kavi said, I consider that one whose intelligence is constantly disturbed by his falsely identifying himself with the temporary material world can achieve real freedom from fear only by worshipping the lotus feet of the infallible Supreme Lord. In such devotional service, all fear ceases entirely. Purport. In the opinion of Srila Sridhar Swami, the word asat atma bhavat in this verse indicates that the living entity is constantly disturbed by fear because he identifies his eternal self with the temporary material body and its paraphernalia. Similarly, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has stated, Bhakti pratikula deha geha dishak asaktim. Because of one's attachment to one's temporary body and so-called home, family, friends, and so on, one's intelligence is always disturbed by fear, and one is unable to appreciate or practice pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. So-called religious activities executed in the bodily conception of life are always accompanied by fear and anxiety about the ultimate result. But pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead frees one from fear and anxiety because it is executed on the platform of Vaikuntha, or the spiritual plane, where there is no fear or anxiety. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the process of Bhakti Yoga is so powerful that even in the stage of sadhana bhakti, in which one is practicing devotional service through rules and regulations, the neophyte can have a direct experience of fearlessness by the mercy of the Lord. As one's devotional service becomes mature, the Lord reveals himself to the devotee, and all fear is totally vanquished forever. Every living entity has a natural propensity to serve God. But because of false identification with the temporary body, one loses touch with this pure constitutional propensity and instead inauspiciously becomes attached to temporary sense gratification in the form of body, home, family, and so on. The result of such false attachment is continuing distress, which can be eradicated only by devotional service to the Supreme Lord. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has quoted the following verse, quote, O my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They are always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, and friends. They are filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia, and they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conceptions of I and mine. As long as they do not take shelter of your safe lotus feet, they are full of such anxieties. Text 34. Even ignorant living entities can very easily come to know the Supreme Lord if they adopt those means prescribed by the Supreme Lord Himself. The process recommended by the Lord is to be known as Bhagavata Dharma, or devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. There are many Vedic scriptures, such as Manu Samhita, that present standard injunctions for the peaceful management of human society. Such Vedic knowledge is based on the Varnashram system, which scientifically divides human society into 4 occupational divisions as well as 4 spiritual divisions. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, however, knowledge that can bring one directly in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Ati Rahasyam, or the most confidential knowledge. Ati Rahasyatvat Samukhinaiva Bhagavata Vidusham Apipungsam Agya Sukhinaivat Malabhyate. Bhagavad Dharma is so confidential that it is spoken by the Lord Himself. The essence of Bhagavad Dharma is given in Bhagavad Gita, wherein Krishna personally instructs Arjuna. Yet in the 11th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, the Lord will give instructions to Uddhava that surpass even the teachings given to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Another reason to read the 11th canto. As Srila Prabhupada stated, quote, undoubtedly Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to encourage Arjuna to fight, and yet to complete the transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhava. The Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill his mission and disseminate knowledge which he had not spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. That's from the purport to Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.4.32 by Srila Prabhupada. Similarly, it is understood that the knowledge that will be presented here by the 9 Yogendras is not their personal concoction, but is authorized knowledge, originally spoken by the Lord Himself. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the living entities, in the course of their wanderings throughout the cycle of birth and death, lose all trace of the personality of Godhead. But when they hear the eternally auspicious topics spoken by the Supreme Lord for their benefit and understand their eternal identities as spirit souls, the realized experience of being an eternal servant of Krishna becomes the basis of Bhagavata Dharma. In the soul's experience as a pure Vaishnava, or servant of God, there is no consideration of being different from God or the same as God, nor is one interested in the kingdom of material sense gratification. The pure devotee simply perceives his particular devotional service to the Supreme Lord and sees himself as an individual part and parcel of the ultimate shelter. A pure devotee experiences that his very being is tied by the ropes of loving devotion to the ultimate shelter himself in one of his direct personal expansions. And in such a perfect state of consciousness, the devotee can perceive the all-pervading, variegated forms of the Absolute Truth. There's a book in my office, in the bookshelf, if you want to read. Okay? Oh, he's got it. Sorry. What's his name? Sorry. I forgot. Sorry. Okay, good. Text 35. O King, one who accepts this process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead will never blunder on his path in this world. Even while running with eyes closed, he will never trip or fall. I think I'll read that again. O King, one who accepts this process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead will never blunder on his path in this world. Even while running with eyes closed, he will never trip and fall. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the word anjaha, easily, which is used in the previous verse, is explained in this verse. He states, anja parinoktam sukharatvam vivinoti. By the word anja, the ease of performing bhakti yoga is established, and this will be elaborated in the present verse. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord himself states, pratyakshavāgamam dharmyam susukam kartum avyayam. The process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is eternal, and it is very joyful, and it is very joyfully and naturally performed. Srila Prabhupada comments, quote, the process of devotional service is a very happy one. Why? Devotional service consists of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. So one can simply hear the chanting of the glories of the Lord, or can attend philosophical lectures on transcendental knowledge given by authorized acharyas. Simply by sitting, one can learn. Then one can eat the remnants of the food offered to God, nice palatable dishes. Simply by sitting, one can learn. In every state, devotional service is joyful. One can execute devotional service even in the most poverty-stricken condition. The Lord says, Patram, Pushpam, Palam Toyam. He is ready to accept from the devotee any kind of offering, never mind what, even a leaf, a flower, a bit of fruit, or a little water, which are available in every part of the world, can be offered by any person, regardless of social position, and will be accepted if offered with love. There are many instances of this in history. Simply by tasting the tulsi leaves offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, great sages like Sanat Kumara became great devotees. Therefore, the devotional process is very nice, and it can be executed in a happy mood. God accepts only the love with which things are offered to Him. The essential point to be understood here is that when a living entity surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he tells the Lord, "My dear Lord, although I am most sinful and unqualified, and for so long have been trying to forget you, now I am taking shelter at your lotus feet. From this day on, I am yours. Whatever I possess, my body, mind, words, family, riches, I am now offering at your lotus feet. Please do with me as you like." End quote. The Supreme Lord Krishna has repeatedly given assurance in Bhagavad Gita that He will protect and redeem such a surrendered living entity, bringing him back home, back to Godhead, for an eternal life in the Lord's own kingdom. Thus, the qualification of surrendering to the Lord is so great and spiritually potent that even if a surrendered soul is deficient in other aspects of pious life, his elevated status is protected by the Lord Himself. In other processes, however, such as yoga, because one depends upon his own determination and intelligence and does not actually seek shelter of the Lord, one is subject to fall at any moment, being protected only by one's own flimsy, limited potency. Therefore, as stated in Srimad-Bhagavatam 10.2.32, Aruya krich trena padam padam tata patanchado na drita yushman angrayaha. If one gives up the shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord and instead tries to advance in the yoga process by one's own determination, or if one tries to make progress in knowledge by one's own speculative power, surely one will eventually fall again to a mediocre material platform, having no protection other than one's own fallible strength. Therefore, the Vaishnava Acharyas, in their commentaries on this verse, have illustrated in various ways the vast superiority of Bhakti Yoga, or pure devotional service. In this connection, Srila Sridhar Swami states, quote, even if running with both eyes closed, a devotee on this path of Bhagavad Dharma will not stumble. Closing one's eyes refers to being in ignorance of standard Vedic literatures. As it is said, the Shruti and Smriti scriptures are the two eyes of the Brahmanas. Lacking one of them, the Brahmana is half blind, and deprived of both, he is considered completely blind. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has clearly stated that even if a devotee is lacking in Vedic knowledge or ignorant of Vaishnava literature, the Lord personally enlightens him from within his heart if the devotee is actually engaged in loving service to the Lord. In this connection, Srila Prabhupada states, quote, when Lord Chaitanya was in Benares promulgating the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, thousands of people were following him. Prakashananda, a very influential and learned scholar in Benares at that time, derided Lord Chaitanya for being a sentimentalist. Sometimes philosophers criticize the devotees because they think that most of the devotees are in the darkness of ignorance and are philosophically naive sentimentalists. Actually, that is not the fact. There are very, very learned scholars who have put forward the philosophy of devotion. But even if a devotee does not take advantage of their literatures or of his spiritual master, if he is sincere in his devotional service, he is helped by Krishna with himself within his heart. So the sincere devotee engaged in Krishna consciousness cannot be without knowledge. The only qualification is that one carry out devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. Yet this facility given by the Lord cannot justify unauthorized concoctions put forward about the process of devotional service in the name of spontaneous devotion. In this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has stated, quote, if one manufactures his own process of devotional service for the sake of attaining the Supreme Lord, such a concoction will cause total ruination. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti goes on to quote, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidim Bina Aikantiki Harer Bhaktir Utpata Yaiva Kalpate. If one's so-called unalloyed devotion to Lord Hari does not take into account the regulations of the Shruti, Smriti, Puranas, and Pancharatra, it is nothing more than a disturbance to society. End quote. In other words, even if one is not learned in the Vedic literatures, if he is engaged in the loving service of the Lord, he is to be accepted as a pure devotee. Nonetheless, such loving devotion cannot in any way contradict the injunctions of revealed scriptures. Such groups as the Prakrita Sahajas ignore the standard regulations of Vaishnava Dharma and engage in illicit, degraded activities, dressing as Radha and Krishna in the name of spontaneous devotion. They claim that because such spontaneous devotion is revealed by the Lord Himself, they need not refer to standard scriptures. Similarly, all over the world, there are pseudo-religionists who manufacture their own processes and claim they are receiving knowledge from the Lord Himself within their hearts. Therefore, it is very important to understand, as stated here, that spontaneous revelation by the Lord within the heart is meant not to alter the eternal process of devotional service to the Lord, but to give a supplementary facility to a sincere devotee who is ignorant of revealed scriptures. In other words, the revealed scriptures describe the eternal process of service to the Lord. Since the Lord is eternal and the living entity is eternal, the process of their loving relationship is also eternal. The Lord never changes His essential nature, nor does the living entity. Therefore, there is no need to change the essential process of devotional, of loving service to the Lord. Special revelation by the Lord is meant to give scriptural knowledge by another means, and not to contradict scriptural knowledge. On the other hand, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has stated that if a devotee is executing all the basic principles of Bhakti Yoga and advancing in devotional service, such a Vaishnava should not be criticized for neglecting the secondary procedures. For example, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada established hundreds of spiritual communities in the Western countries for practicing Krishna consciousness. The devotees in these communities give up illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, and meat eating, and constantly engage in service to Krishna. Such followers of Srila Prabhupada are able to make wonderful spiritual advancement and convert many thousands of people to the process of devotional service. In fact, all the faithful members of ISKCON who follow the standard regulations remain free from material contamination and make visible progress in going back home, back to Godhead. Such members of ISKCON cannot possibly execute all the details of the Varnashram Dharma system. In fact, many Western devotees can barely pronounce Sanskrit words and are not very expert in performing elaborate sacrifices based on chanting of mantras and offering of oblations. But because they are executing all the essential principles of Bhakti Yoga by giving up material sense gratification and constantly engaging in loving service to Krishna, their position is guaranteed both in this life and in the next. We have seen many sophisticated Sanskrit scholars and learned experts in the details of Vedic sacrifices who can hardly even follow the basic principles of human life, namely, no illicit sex, no meat eating, no gambling, and no intoxication. Such brilliant scholars and ritualistic performers are generally seen to be attached to a materialistic conception of life and are fond of mental speculation. Although in Bhagavad Gita the Lord Himself has given perfect knowledge for all time, such so-called scholars consider themselves more intelligent than the Lord and thus speculate on the meaning of Vedic literature. Such speculation certainly constitutes a fall from perfect spiritual life. And what then is to be said of materialistic fruitive activities, which are illusory in every sense of the term? The transcendental devotees are able to remain aloof from the pollution of fruitive activity and mental speculation, and that is the essential purport of this verse. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has warned that the words yan astaya indicate that the exalted status of a Vaishnava can never be accorded to one who is not following the basic regulations of Bhakti Yoga. Nor can it apply to one who is sometimes serving Krishna and sometimes serving the illusory energy, Maya, by mental speculation or fruitive activities. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has concluded, in all dharmas other than Bhagavata Dharma, one must consider the conditioned soul's qualification. But a soul surrendered to the Lord is never confounded by error, even if unqualified in all other respects. His feet never stumble, and he never falls. Even though wandering in the world at whim, he always resides in an auspicious place by the influence of his unswerving worship. The unique potency of Bhagavata Dharma does not appear in any of the other dharmas of the world. There is no comparison between a surrendered individual who has taken shelter of Bhagavata Dharma and the practitioner of any other dharma. Text 36. In accordance with the particular nature one has acquired in conditioned life, whatever one does with body, words, mind, senses, intelligence, or purified consciousness, one should offer to the Supreme, thinking, this is for the pleasure of Lord Narayana. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has commented in this regard, that a person who engages all these sensory activities of his body, mind, words, intelligence, ego, and consciousness in the service of the Supreme Lord cannot be considered to be on the same level as a karmi working for his personal sense gratification. Although apparently still a conditioned soul, one who offers the fruits of all his activities to the Lord can no longer be touched by the countless miseries that arise from the reactions to materialistic activities. Because of enmity against the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His omnipotent authority, the conditioned living entity performs activities against the order of the Lord. Yet self-realized souls continue to perform all types of work within this world to carry out the mission of the Supreme Lord. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, those karmis who are sufficiently pious follow the example of the self-realized souls by trying to offer the fruits of their own duties at the lotus feet of the Lord. Although this is counted as karma mishra bhakti, or devotional service mixed with the desire to execute fruitive activities, such mixed devotional service is gradually transformed into pure devotional service. As the pious fruitive workers disengage themselves, step by step, from the bogus philosophy of enjoyment of one's hard-earned rewards, pure devotional service rewards them with complete good fortune. Srila Sridhar Swami has commented, Atmana Chitta Chitina Hankarena Va Anushrito Yak Subhavas Tasmat. Although one may still be in the bodily concept of life, he should offer the fruit of his work to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those with a primitive, materialistic concept of the Supreme Lord consider the Lord present only in a temple or church. They make some offering to the Lord in the place of worship, but in their normal activities, they claim proprietorship, not thinking that God is present everywhere and within everyone. We have practical experience of so many so-called religious men who become very offended if their children try to become servants of the Supreme Lord. They feel God should be pleased with whatever humble offering I give Him, but my family and ordinary business affairs belong to me and are under my control. The perception of anything as separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead or His proprietorship is called Maya, or illusion. Srila Sridhar Swami is quoted, "Na kevalam viditak kritam eviti niyama subhava nusari lokikam api." The regulation that one should serve the Supreme Lord does not refer only to prescribed religious paths, ceremonies, and regulations. Rather, all the activities one performs in this world, according to one's personal nature, should be dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words karoti yat sakalam parasmai narayana yeti samarpayat tat in this verse are very significant. A similar verse is found in Bhagavad Gita 9:27. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yajjahosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kadushva manarpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, and all the austerities that you perform should be done as an offering unto me. The objection may be raised. Since our ordinary activities are performed with a material body and material mind, not by the spirit soul, how can such activities be offered to the Supreme Lord, who is completely transcendental to the material world? How can such activities be considered spiritual? In answer to this, it is stated in the Vishnu Purana, Varnashrama Charavrata Purushena Padak Puman Vishnur Aradyate Panta Nanyat Tat Toshakaranam. One who wants to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, must accept the system of Varnashrama Dharma and worship the Lord through the execution of His prescribed duties. In Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord has personally taken credit for establishing the system of Varnashram Dharma. Chaturvarnyamaya Shrishtam Gunakarma Vibhaga Shaha. Therefore, if one offers his work within the Varnashrama Dharma system to the Supreme Lord, such work is counted as devotional service. According to one's swabhava, or nature, one may work as an intellectual or priest, or as an administrator or military man, as an agriculturalist or mercantile man, or as a laborer or craftsman. And while working, everyone should meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thinking, Yat Sakalam Parasmai Narayanaya. I am working for the Supreme Lord. This is the same statement that Srila Prabhupada makes in his purport to the 18th chapter, 57th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, quote, I have been appointed this duty by Sri Krishna, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we think that before we do whatever we do, this is perfect Krishna consciousness. So here, in the purport, it says, I am working for the Supreme Lord. Whatever result comes from my work, I shall accept the bare minimum for my personal maintenance, and the rest I shall offer for the glorification of Lord Narayana. Srila Jiva Goswami has pointed out, Kaminam tu sarvataiva na dushkarmarpanam. One cannot offer dushkarma, or sinful, wicked activities, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The four pillars of sinful life are illicit sex, meat eating, gambling, and intoxication. Such activities are never acceptable as offerings to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The example may be given that although in a free society each person is allowed to choose his own occupation, even a democratic government will not allow a citizen to choose the occupation of thief or murderer. In the same way, according to the laws of God, one is invited to work according to his own nature in the varnashrama system, but one is forbidden to adopt a criminal life of sinful activities violating the laws of God. Cheers. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has given a nice description of how one should offer one's ordinary activities to the Supreme Lord. He says that an ordinary sense gratifier begins his activities in the morning by passing stool and urine, cleaning his mouth, brushing his teeth, bathing, meeting his friends and family members, and discussing with them the day's business. In this way, one has so many activities during the day, and a sense gratifier executes all these activities for his personal material enjoyment. A karmi, on the other hand, working under the jurisdiction of the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, will perform the same activities for the pleasure of the demigods and his forefathers. Thus, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a devotee of the Supreme Lord Narayana should similarly perform all of his daily activities for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. In this way, everything we do throughout the day will become bhakti-anga, or a supplementary aspect of our devotional service to Krishna. It's what a profound statement. There's a pastime of Lord Chaitanya. He was going to do his morning ablutions, and he had a young brahmachari with him who was very smart. Young boy. I don't know how, no more than 9, 10, 11, like that. And so, while the Lord was going to the place to do his ablutions, he caught his tongue with his teeth so that he wouldn't chant the holy name, because he was always chanting the holy name. He never stopped chanting the holy name. So the boy asked him, "My Lord, why are you biting your tongue?" And he said, "Well, I don't want to chant Hare Krishna while I go to a contaminated place." And the boy said, it was one of the great disciples actually of him, but he was a boy at the time. "But my Lord, you told us that there's no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy names of the Lord." And Lord Chaitanya said, "That's right." So he took this young boy as giving him an instruction, and he joyfully chanted Hare Krishna the whole time he did his ablutions. So in this way, I'll repeat this last sentence, but the acharyas have emphasized in their commentaries on this verse that such a false ego by which one identifies oneself as a brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, shudra, sannyasi, grihastha, and so on, should also be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, when one becomes very much attracted to hearing and chanting about the Supreme Lord and not merely offering Him the fruits of one's work, one has attained the stage called Sarupa Siddha Bhakti, or the stage in which actual devotion becomes visible. Did you hear that? Did everyone hear that? It means when you actually become attached to hearing and chanting, then you have attained the stage called Sarupa Siddha Bhakti, or at least the beginning of that stage, in which actual devotion becomes visible. The example may be given that although any good citizen will pay his taxes to the government, he may not necessarily love the government or its leaders, to say the least, nowadays. Similarly, a pious living entity can understand that he is working under the laws of God, and therefore, in accordance with Vedic injunctions or the injunctions of other scriptures, he offers a portion of his assets to the Supreme Lord in religious ceremonies. But when such a pious person actually becomes attached to chanting and hearing about the personal qualities of the Lord, and when love thus becomes visible, he is considered to be reaching the mature stage of life. In this regard, Srila Jiva Goswami has quoted several verses that very nicely show the development of love for Godhead. Quote, "May the merciful Lord show mercy on me by demonstrating the misery created by sinful desires." Quote, "Unintelligent persons have unflinching affection for the objects of sense gratification. Similarly, may I always remember you, so that that same attachment applied to you never leaves my heart." And from the Vishnu Purana, as the minds of young girls, yuvati nam, yata yuni, yunam cha yuvatau yata, mano bidabite tadvan, mano me ramatam twayi. As the minds of young girls take pleasure in thinking of a young boy, and those of young boys take pleasure in thinking of a young girl, may my mind take pleasure in you. Mama sukarmani dushkarmani yad chadraga samanyam tad sarvato bhavina bhagavad vishayam eva bhavatu. Whatever attraction I have for pious or sinful activities, let that attraction be wholeheartedly invested in you. What a purport. Stunning. Okay, if you have like reflections or questions or anything, make a mental note or write them down, because when we finish the reading, we'll entertain those. Text 37. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. Thus, this bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and as his very life and soul. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the objection may be raised that since fear is caused by ignorance, it can be dispelled by knowledge, and there is no need to worship the Supreme Lord. The living entity falsely identifies with his material body, family, society, and so on. And he simply has to give up this false identification. Then what will Maya be able to do? In reply to this argument, Srila Sridhar Swami has quoted the following verse from Bhagavad Gita. Any guesses? Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. The living entity, called Jiva Tattva, is one of the potencies of the Supreme Lord, but the constitutional position of the living entity is tatastha, or marginal. Being minute, every living entity is eternally dependent upon the Supreme Living Entity, Krishna. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature as follows: Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Eko Bahunam, Yo Vididati Kaman. Among all the eternally conscious beings, there is one supreme, eternal living being who is supplying the needs of all the innumerable others. Kathopanishad. Krishnadas, Kaviraj, has stated, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ara Sabhabritya. Krishna is the only independent controller. All other living entities depend upon him. Just as the finger is part and parcel of the body and therefore must always be engaged in bodily service, we as parts and parcels of Krishna, Mamaivangsha, Jivaloke, Jivabhutak Sanatanaha, have the eternal duty, Sanatan Dharma, of engaging in the unalloyed service of the Lord. The potency of the Lord that enlightens us in the Lord's service is called Chit Shakti. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati comments that when the living entity develops a spirit of independence, he is forced to come to the material world, where he enters into various types of petty and undesirable behavior that create a fearful situation for him. The Bahiranga Shakti, the illusory potency of the Lord, covers all trace of the Chit Shakti and imposes one material body after another upon the living entity for his gross sinful enjoyment. As further punishment, the living entity who has given up his loving relationship with Krishna loses all power to perceive the eternal, blissful form of the Supreme Lord, who is his actual shelter. Instead, the living entity becomes attached to many temporary, phantasmagorical forms, such as his personal body, the bodies of his family members and friends, his nation, his city, with its buildings and cars, and innumerable types of ephemeral material scenery. In such a state of gross ignorance, the idea of returning to one's original identity is no longer even crosses the mind. By the laws of God, the three modes of material nature are constantly in conflict, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. This conflict is described in many places in the Bhagavatam as guna vyatikaram. When the living entity is bewildered by the interactions of the modes of material nature, he comes to the conclusion of relativity and assumes that God and worship of God are simply byproducts of the relative, contradictory interactions of nature's modes. In the name of anthropological, sociological, or psychological perspective, the living entity falls deeper and deeper into the darkness of materialistic ignorance, dedicating himself to mundane piety, economic development, sense gratification, or speculation in which he regards the Absolute as lacking variety and personality, which he assumes to be products of the interactions of nature's modes. The illusory potency of the Supreme Lord is duratyaya. It is impossible to escape without the direct mercy of Krishna. Mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. The example may be given that when the sun is covered by clouds, no man-made apparatus can remove them from the sky. But the sun itself, which created the clouds, can immediately burn away the cloudy covering and reveal itself. Similarly, when we become covered by the illusory potency of the Lord, we identify with our temporary material body, and thus we are always in fear and anxiety. But when we surrender to the Lord Himself, He can immediately free us from this illusion. The material world is padam padam vad yad pipadam. It is dangerous at every step. When a living entity understands that he is not the material body, but an eternal servant of God, his fear is vanquished. As stated by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, quote, "In this Bhagavata Dharma, devotees have no need to fear the bondage of material existence. That fear goes away of its own accord for one who engages in devotional service." It is important to make clear that bhayam, or fear, cannot ultimately be vanquished simply by impersonal self-realization, as expressed by the words aham brahmasmi, I am spirit soul. In Srimad-Bhagavatam, Narada Muni says to Vyasadeva, Naishkarmyam apyachutta bhava varjitam na shobhate. Mere naishkarmyam, or cessation of material activities and repudiation of the bodily concept of life, cannot ultimately save one. The living entity must find a superior shelter on the spiritual platform. Otherwise, he will come back to the fearful situation of material existence. That is stated in Shastra. Aruya, krich drena padam padam tata, patantyado nadrita jushman angrayaha. Although one may with great labor and effort struggle up to the Brahman platform, klesho dikatadaste sham abhyakta sakta chetasam, if he does not find a suitable shelter, he will come back to the material platform. His so-called liberation is vimuktamana, liberation by imagination. The living entity is by nature pleasure-seeking, anandamaya. Now we are suffering because we are falsely seeking pleasure on the material platform. And as a result, we are becoming entangled in the painful complexities of material existence. But if we try to give up the pleasure-seeking propensity altogether, we shall eventually become frustrated and return to the platform of material pleasure-seeking. Although there is eternal existence on the Brahman platform of personal realization, there is no ananda. Variety is the mother of enjoyment. In the Vaikuntha planets there is actual spiritual ananda. Krishna is there in his ecstatic spiritual form, surrounded by his blissful associates, all of them eternally full of bliss and knowledge. They have nothing to do with material existence. In the spiritual planets, even the scenery and birds and animals are fully conscious of Krishna and are absorbed in transcendental bliss. Yad gatva na nivartante tad dhamma paramam mama. One who goes to the blissful spiritual planet of Krishna will be fully satisfied and never come back to the material platform. Therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said, Kim chatra bhaktai samsara bandhan nabetavyam. Only the bhakta actually becomes free from fear. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has emphasized the necessity of accepting a bona fide spiritual master who is Vrajendranandana Preshta. the dearmost servitor of the son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. The bona fide spiritual master is completely free from envy of other living entities, and therefore he freely distributes knowledge of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entities who are inimical to the service of the Lord somehow hear this knowledge submissively, they become free from the illusory potency of the Lord, which has covered them and thrown them into various miserable species of life. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, by the mercy of the spiritual master, the faithful disciple gradually realizes the transcendental position of Lord Narayana, who is served with great awe and reverence by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. As the disciple's transcendental knowledge gradually increases, even the Paramaishvaya, or supreme opulence of the Lord of Vaikuntha, becomes pale in the light of the beauty of Govinda, Krishna. Govinda has inconceivable potency to enchant and give pleasure, and by the mercy of the spiritual master, the disciple gradually develops his own blissful relationship, rasa, with Govinda. Having understood the blissful pastimes of Lakshmi Narayana, Sri Sita Rama, Rukmini Dwarkadisha, and finally Lord Krishna himself, the purified living entity is given the unique privilege of participating directly in the devotional service of Krishna, who becomes his only object and shelter. Text 38. Although the duality of the material world does not ultimately exist, the conditioned soul experiences it as real under the influence of his own conditioned intelligence. This imaginary experience of a world separate from Krishna can be compared to the act of dreaming and desiring. When the conditioned soul dreams at night of something desirable or horrible, or when he daydreams of what he would like to have or avoid, he creates a reality that has no existence beyond his own imagination. The tendency of the mind to accept and reject various activities based on sense gratification. The tendency of the mind is to accept and reject various activities based on sense gratification. Therefore, an intelligent person should control the mind, restricting it from the illusion of seeing things separate from Krishna. And when the mind is thus controlled, he will experience actual fearlessness. Purport. Although the conditioned mind is bewildered by the objects of sense gratification offered by Maya, illusion, if one takes to the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord, such material sense gratification gradually dissipates, for it is merely a mental concoction of the conditioned soul. Srila Sridhar Swami has emphasized by the words Abhya Vicharini Bhakti that one cannot dissipate the illusion of material sense gratification unless one takes to the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord. As Srila Rupa Goswami has stated. Any takers? Anya bila shita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavitam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama. Unalloyed devotional service cannot be mixed with material sense gratification or mental speculation. The servant must act only for the satisfaction of the master. Similarly, Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, Mam ekam sharanam braja. One must see only Krishna everywhere and must act exclusively for the satisfaction of Lord Krishna, the eternal master of every living entity. Srila Madhvacharya has quoted several verses from the Harivangsha illustrating that the living entity, bewildered by identifying with his material body, home, family, friends, and so on, and thus entangled in the cycle of birth and death, accepts phantasmagoria as reality. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Shravana Kirtanadi Lakshana Matratvam Yato na Hanyata. If one seriously desires to vanquish the duality of material illusion, one must adopt the process of chanting and hearing the glories of the Supreme Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also cites the following Vedic reference. Any takers? Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Vakevalam, Kalo Nasteva, 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 Gatyur Anyatha. According to Vedic literatures, the living entities of this Kali Yuga are very feeble in their power to understand spiritual knowledge. Manda sumanda matayo, manda bhagya upadritaha. Their minds are always disturbed, and they're lazy and misguided by so many bogus leaders. They are further described in the Bhagavatam as nishatvan, impatient and impious, durmedan, possessed of weak intelligence, and harisatayasha, very short-lived. Therefore, one who seriously wants to overcome the ignorance of material life must surrender to the process of chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, as well as reciting and rendering submissive and oral reception to the transcendental literatures presented by the Lord, such as Bhagavad Gita, Srimad-Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. It should be understood that the living entity is completely spiritual and never actually becomes mixed with material energy. Asango yayam purusha. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, tasmin shuddhe pikalpyate. Although the living entity is Shuddha, pure spirit soul, he imagines that he is a material creation and thus entangles himself in the network of illusion called Dehapatya Kalatradi. That's 214. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has used the word Manasa Pratyaksha to describe the experience of material life. Manasa Pratyaksha means that which is experienced only within the mind. The actual Pratyaksha is described in Bhagavad Gita. Rajavidya, Rajaguyam, Pavitram, Idamuttamam, Pratyakshavagavam Dharmyam, Susukam, Kartamavyayam. When one submissively hears the instructions given by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita, which constitute the king of all knowledge, Rajavidya, and the most confidential of all information, Rajaguyam, by associating with such spotless spiritual knowledge, paritram, idam, uttamam, one can directly experience one's eternal nature, pratyakshavagavam. By experiencing one's eternal nature, one becomes thoroughly religious, dharmyam, blissful, susukam, and eternally engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, kartum avyayam. Chakravarti Thakur, something's missing there. What's got the book? Do you see the full name, Chakravarti Thakur, in that the beginning of that paragraph? Huh? Srila Vishwanath. it's left out of the, it's just one of these things where they transfer over from one, software to another. Sometimes it loses things. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has quoted the following verse from Srimad-Bhagavatam. Quote, "The mind is like an impetuous horse that even persons who have regulated their senses and breath cannot control. Those in this world who try to tame the uncontrolled mind, but who abandon the feet of their spiritual master, encounter hundreds of obstacles in their cultivation of various distressful practices." O unborn Lord, they are like merchants on a boat in the ocean who have failed to employ a helmsman. The importance of the spiritual master has already been indicated in the previous verse by the words Guru Devatatma. Unless one accepts a bona fide spiritual master in the authorized parampara as one's worshipable deity in life and soul, there is no question of controlling the mind or overcoming the duality of material life. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has made the following comments on this verse. Control of the mind is a result of living a life of devotional service to the Lord. I'll read that again. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has made the following comments on this verse. Quote, control of the mind is a result of living a life of devotional service to the Lord. By the influence of fixed devotional service, the accepting and rejecting mind can stop its thirst for sensory enjoyment apart from the Lord, from Krishna. In transcendental Krishna consciousness, there is no contradiction, pettiness, or lack of ecstasy. In other words, it is not like a material object which always proves temporary and constantly miserable. Having forgotten Krishna, the conditioned living entity is suffering the misdirection and perversion of his own so-called intelligence. The living entities are fragmental parts of the Supreme Shelter, Krishna, but have fallen from Krishna's kingdom of spiritual pastimes. I'll read that again, starting to fade. The living entities are fragmental parts of the Supreme Shelter, Krishna, but have fallen from Krishna's kingdom of spiritual pastimes. Because of forgetting the Supreme Lord, they become prone to sinful life and turn their attention to dangerous material objects which fill them with constant fear. If one desires to subdue the mind, which is constantly engaged in the duality of material concoction, of mental concoction, one must take to the devotional service of Lord Krishna. Thank you. So, devotees are starting to disband because it's getting late actually over here. And I was out all day and I'm ready to wind down before I take rest, so that I can take rest. So we'll start tomorrow on verse, keep this in your mind, 39. So, these purports are extremely dense, but when we read slowly like this out loud and all add our intelligence or listen with our intelligence, it becomes crystal clear, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Am I just imagining this? No. It's just not just me? No. KC is saying no. Yeah, it's very, very clear and very precise and very, it's almost, unassailable. It is unassailable, actually. All right. Reflections. Comments. Yes, Deva Prasta has a comment or a question. Comment.
Earlier, the benediction kind of was given to a devotee who may not have proper knowledge of the Vedic literatures, or maybe intricacies of devotional service, but who is earnestly engaged in devotional service.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that how ingenious Prabhupada gave us these books that even if you don't understand, but you expose yourself to this sound vibration.
Hearing.
This hearing.
Yes.
You may not understand for many, whatever reasons, but still by continuing to do that, clarity comes.
Actually, this pastime of Lord Chaitanya meeting the illiterate Brahmana is directly relevant to this statement and to this section of the Bhagavatam, because our acharyas comment that it's not that this illiterate Brahmana didn't understand devotional service. In other words, what's being said here is that one doesn't have to be a scholar, and have a perfect memory and all those things to be able to be a pure devotee. But one has to have heard and understood. So even though he was sitting there, with the Bhagavad Gita, trying to read it, all the verses every day, on the order of his spiritual master, he was laughed at by the other villagers because they knew he was illiterate. What's he doing, trying to read Sanskrit literature when he can't read? But he was trying every day. And sometimes he would cry. And it looked like he was crying from the teasing of the villagers. When Lord Chaitanya came and saw him, he noticed that this was something special. So he approached him. And the Brahmana was very kind of smitten with Lord Chaitanya, and he could understand that he wasn't trying to tease him. He was sincerely asking, what are you doing? So then he volunteered the information that he was reading on the order of his spiritual master, 18 chapters of the Gita every day. But unfortunately, he was illiterate and he couldn't understand the words. So then Lord Chaitanya said, but I noticed that sometimes you're crying. Is that out of embarrassment or humiliation? He said, no. He said, when I see this photo in the front of the book of Krishna, driving the chariot of Arjuna, and realize that the Supreme Lord is acting as a servant of his devotee, I get overwhelmed and I cry. And Lord Chaitanya picked him up and embraced him, and he said, you are the real knower of the Gita. So our acharyas say that it's not that he was just getting some osmosis. He had actually gone to lectures and heard, and he understood the basics from hearing. But he was so pure-hearted, by the dutiful, execution of a order of his spiritual master, which for him was impossible to do, but he did it anyway, because he trusted wholeheartedly, and it was unalloyed devotional service. So therefore, the hearing that he was doing from the classes empowered him to understand, and he actually understood deep, spiritual concepts. So it's a fact that we don't have to become scholars and very learned in that sense, in an academic sense. But we should hear. And even if you can't remember, you'll get it. I have this realization, since I started doing this, reading out loud every day, I don't have time anymore to sit down and cross-reference verses and, try to remember everything that I've heard and all that. I just go on hearing, and I'm actually realizing that's what I forgot to put in my offering. I just remembered a point that I forgot to put in my offering. That when you're actually hearing, in the process of hearing, if you are hearing honestly and sincerely, then that time you spend doing that is non-different than samadhi. It's non-different than meditation on the Lord. It's a profound point if you think about it. Therefore it says over and over again, if one is constantly hearing and chanting, then he's reached the goal actually. Even if he hasn't assimilated everything, even if he doesn't understand everything that he's hearing. It's just a matter of time. So, refresh, yes. In this regard, every day we say,
This incidence of Brahmana also proves this.
Yes. Yes. Sir? Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. This is the leading Sankirtan devotee of the, what's the name of the traveling party? What? This is Parameshwar. The Parameshwar. Yes, he's been leading a Sankirtan party for years and years and years and years. Probably as many years as many people have been alive. So we welcome you joyfully and gratefully for your Sangha. Hare Krishna. Parameshwar for Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. All right, all of you, thank you so much. Please try to share these readings with your friends and their friends, and let us spread the glories of the Srimad-Bhagavatam and the hearing of the Srimad-Bhagavatam to everyone. And while we're hearing, as we just pointed out, and which we just are hearing about, then you will be in samadhi, even if you don't know it. Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.